Thanks everyone for joining. This is our last podcast of the series. This is series 1, episode 6, and we're delighted to be joined by Steph Elswood today, who's taken time out of her day to join us on our podcast. So thank you, Steph. We just obviously, first of all, just give us a background about yourself, and please just share your mental health experiences with us.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here. So I run an online Instagram called Steph Elswood, which originally started as Healthy Chef Steph, which was kind of a recovery page for my mental health issues. From the age of about 14 to 19, I battled with anorexia, bulimia and depression. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today, and kind of how I recovered and also use that experience to hopefully help others moving forwards.
Yeah, great to meet you, Steph. And as Ross said, delighted to have you on here to share your story, and it's really appreciated from all of us here at Pause. I think the first question from me would be, you've touched on your experiences just there. I know you said you were 14, but at what point did you realise, I've got a problem here, and ultimately I need to seek some help with this?
I think. So kind of how it happened for me, I suffered from the age of 14 to 16 quite badly during GCSE period, and wasn't really aware that it was a problem. It was kind of just being exposed to kind of diet culture norms of like tracking your calories and using MyFitnessPal and things like that. And there was a social media platform at the time called Tumblr that was really kind of popular. And there was a lot of pro eating disorder pages, but I didn't really know what an eating disorder was. So I was kind of following them for advice and expertise, and kind of just following what all of these thin, pretty girls were doing, and not realizing that it was harmful. And it wasn't until I got to quite a dark place around GCSE time that I told a friend of mine, just that I was a little bit worried about what I was doing. And she told her mum, who told my mum. And then it was kind of resolved there and then. And my mum spoke to me and kept like a watchful eye. And then it wasn't until about a year and a half later that it started to happen again, when I was in another stressful environment. And that's when, again, I knew it was happening, but I didn't want to admit it, because last time I knew that I was put under such scrutiny and like being watched the whole time. I was like, if I tell someone about this, it's going to be like I'm an animal in a zoo again, and everyone's going to be watching me. So I didn't. But my health really started to deteriorate. My skin turned grey. My hair started to fall out. I was passing out a lot in my performing arts classes, because I went to full-time performing arts school. And it was actually my tap teacher that said, "You're not okay, you need to go to the headmistress." So I did, and I didn't have the best understanding of eating disorders or mental health at the time, because it just wasn't talked about as much as it is, say now, 5 or 6 years later. And she basically said if I didn't tell my mum the situation by half term, she was going to have to ask me to leave. And obviously this is a school that I'd worked my entire life to get into, and I couldn't. My worst nightmare would be to kind of be kicked out. So I came home, I told my mum, and then she took me straight to my GP. So it kind of was, I was aware of the situation, but I didn't realise the extent of it until kind of external people stepped in. And I think that's the hard thing about this kind of thing, especially with mental health issues. If you've got this horrible little voice inside your head telling you what to do, and no one knows about it, it's a little secret, and you almost build a companionship with it. So it's like, do you even want to let go of that voice? And are you even aware that it's there? If that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, not a nice thing to go through. So once you saw the GP, what was the sort of next steps from that procedure? Were you basically told to see someone else? Did they give you any medication or anything like that, or any help from the offset?
Well, being totally honest, I think it's the same with anyone that goes through like a traumatic experience, and obviously on different scales, trauma varies. But during that time, I think I was so depleted of energy that I do have a lot of gaps in my memory. So I can only remember big events. So for example, I remember going into the GP office with my mum. I remember the GP asking her to leave, but I don't remember what I said. But I believe I must have said something quite worrying, because my GP then referred me to the Maudsley Hospital in Denmark Hill, and I went for an initial conversation with them, and it was just like a one-off interview to kind of find out where I'm at, my background and things like that. And I just was adamant that I was okay. So I didn't really want to speak to anyone or kind of admit that there was a problem, because I do think there is an element nowadays that it's frowned upon. If you have something you're going through, you're broken. I didn't want to admit that I was broken because I'd always been so put together and organised and things like that. And then from there, I went on to weekly meetings at the Maudsley, where I'd meet kind of my therapist one-to-one for an hour every week. And that happened for a year to a year and a half. And then after that, I went for monthly checkups for about 6 to 8 months. I was offered antidepressants at the time, but I was only 16, maybe just 17, and I didn't really want to go on medication. And again, that was me kind of refusing it out of the fact of I'm not broken, I don't need fixing, that kind of thing. And I think I am glad I didn't take it, because I went down the therapy route first before just taking the medication. And yeah, that's kind of the process I went through.
So, Steph, in terms of at that time, and I know this is quite a difficult question, and maybe you can touch on how aware you were of this, but during the process of obviously you being referred to the hospital, do you have any recollection of what it was like for your family, people around you? Have you spoken to them since and kind of understood maybe how they were feeling at the time as well?
Yeah, I know. A lot of my friends found it difficult because I lost all my personality. I've always been quite a happy-go-lucky, silly person that would just be playful and fun. And when I was going through it, I was just I wasn't there. I wasn't in the room. Like, my eyes would be dead. I wasn't smiling, and I had no energy to be myself. So I think they found it difficult because they didn't know if that was just me now or if there was something going on. And obviously they didn't want to ask in case any of the questions they asked were triggering. So I know my friends struggled with it. My mum was heartbroken because I think when you see someone every day, she just never questioned it, because I'd always been petite. And also eating disorders aren't always about the physical appearance. You can be of a slightly larger size and still be struggling. So she didn't really notice that. And I was always getting home late from school because I went to school in London. I just say, oh, I got dinner on the way home, and she wouldn't question it because we've always been so trusting of each other. So I think my mum definitely took it very personally, and it's only in the last few years that we've spoken about it and how much she was heartbroken. And then, to be honest, my dad didn't really understand it. I think because of his generation, of his kind of work life, he'd never really come across eating disorders before and didn't understand the mental health side of things to that. So it's only now in recent years that I've spoken to my dad more about it, that he understands what I went through. But it was kind of my mum who felt the brunt of it. I think she will always feel the emotions that I feel. If ever I'm sad, she'll feel that with me. If ever I'm elated, she'll feel that with me. So I know it was a really difficult time for her.
Yeah, Steph, you mentioned and you touched on that you had obviously treatment at the hospital. What level of support were you offered? Were there? What was the treatment plan like? And once you'd left that hospital, was there any aftercare for you? Was there people ringing you? Was there something online that you could follow, etc.? What happened?
So the first few consultations were kind of just figuring out almost what was wrong with me, what kind of level of eating disorder I had. And I can't lie, for the first few sessions, I did not want to be there. I was like, I'm not broken. Who is this woman? She doesn't know me. I should be in school right now. I don't want to talk to you. And it actually wasn't until I was in one of the waiting rooms, and there was 2 occasions where a girl from my school, from my previous school, when we were about 11 years old, walked in, and she was frail and gaunt, and she was going through something similar. And we didn't say a word to each other because acknowledging that we were there made it real. And that was terrifying, because I was like, wow, someone else who I've always seen as so intelligent and strong and gorgeous is going through this. I'm not alone. So that was kind of a turning point in my treatment plan, because it was opening my mindset to almost acknowledging that I had a problem. And then the next session, I remember waiting in the waiting room, and a woman who must have been in her 40s or 50s walked in, and she didn't have many teeth. And I'd heard horror stories about from bulimia, it wearing away your teeth and your gums and things like that from the acidity. She didn't have much hair, and at this point my hair had started to fall out, and she looked really fragile and as if the wind would blow her over. And I wanted to cry right there and then, because it was almost like I was looking into what my future could be. So then from that session onwards, I said to my therapist, I've just seen someone in the waiting room, and I had a massive cry. And it was the first kind of time I'd shown emotion to my therapist, because I finally had realized, okay, I do have a problem and I want to heal it. And so I went in for monthly kind of weekly meetings, and I can't lie, I was weighed every single meeting, which was very triggering, considering a lot of my issues came with feeling like I was too fat or weighing too heavy. So I got to the point where I just didn't look. I was like, I'd rather not know my weight. And it was quite difficult, because they'd always track your weight on a little graph and kind of show you that graph. And obviously your weight fluctuates all the time. And on days when I went in and was slightly lighter, I would feel pride in a sense. And on the days when I felt a bit heavier, I would feel a little bit deflated. But they taught me a lot of different systems. I think it was CBT kind of work. I can't remember the scientific term. I think it's cognitive behavioral therapy. And she taught me loads of tips. She taught me to be aware of my triggers. And there was like a traffic light system of, are you in the red zone? Are you in the amber zone? Are you in the green zone? And I had this huge folder of worksheets and things like that, which was great. And I still have them now, just in case. I haven't picked them up in years, but it's nice to have them there. But one thing that I would say, and I think this is because maybe I went through the NHS, I'm not sure if it's different if you were to go private, but there was not a lot of aftercare. If ever I felt like some of my old habits were creeping up, I didn't have a contact number that I could just pick up the phone and call. And I understand that the NHS needs a lot more funding in this area. Like, I totally appreciate that. But if I didn't have the close-knit kind of family and friends unit that I had, I think I probably would have struggled a lot more than I did. So I think as much as I'm so grateful for my treatment, I think that paired with the community around me is kind of why I'm in the position I am today. And I think lastly, sorry I've rambled, but lastly, I think you have to be willing to want to receive the help, to kind of receive what they have to give you. If you don't want to be healed, then you can just sit in that room in silence and tick a box. But I think after that experience in the waiting room, I was like, I need to be myself again. This isn't me.
Yeah, I mean, look, Steph, you're not rambling at all. This is exactly, why we wanted you on here, because you've got such a special story to tell. And I appreciate it is a really difficult thing to share your experiences, but it will help so many people. And that's the great thing about this. This is why we do this. I mean, on a bit more of a positive note, I know that you spoke about a mental health qualification that you've since attained. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So it's a mental health first aid qualification, and it was kind of more because I as part of my recovery journey, I wanted to speak about it, because if you don't talk about it, then it's not real, and it's easier to hide. Whereas if I started to kind of speak about it and vocalize my kind of demons, then they were going to be out in the light and not so aggressive. So I spoke about it a lot more, and that opened up some beautiful questions and conversations with some vulnerable people, and obviously every experience is different. I can only kind of speak anecdotally or kind of what I went through, and so the more people were asking me for advice, I didn't have the knowledge on a mass scale to kind of or recommend them to different places. So I booked in for this mental health first aid qualification. It was 2 days long, and it just gave me the tools and the answers to be able to give to these people, to one, kind of give them a sense of hope, and also to direct them in the way of professional help and guidance and the kind of different options that they have. And when I was on the course, it was amazing to see how many people were coming from big corporate workplaces, so that there was someone mental health first aid trained within the office, or it's also to be able to notice others suffering, because not everyone is great at articulating they have a problem, and they can internalize those feelings or kind of hide them a bit. So just having that awareness of what to look for, what's a sign of a mental health issue, what could be kind of like teaching you how to read between the lines. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because having gone through what I've gone through, I felt like I had an empathetic side to me that understood others going through mental health issues. And then doing that course then gave me the awareness and almost the kind of ability to then help that person further. I can't give them therapy or anything like that, but I can recommend them people that can help them professionally.
Yeah, honestly, Steph, hats off to you, because for you to go through a traumatic event like you have and you've explained to everyone, then to turn around and put it in a positive light and then help other people, I think honestly is a fantastic achievement in itself. But I just want to talk to you quickly. You've got the Stay Sassy Foundation, which honestly is amazing. For people who are watching, who don't know what it is, could you just tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, a bit of backstory. I've mentioned that I'm really close with my family, and I was really close with my mum's mum. And my nan moved in with us towards the end of her life. She's sadly no longer with us. And she had lung cancer. And she wasn't the most confident woman in the world. She had a very turbulent marriage, which ended in divorce and all of these kind of things. And she was a woman that kind of shrunk herself. Anyway, towards the end of her life, I saw her begin to not care what other people thought of her, to kind of live her own life, to be outspoken, and I loved it. And she very quickly became my best friend, because we spent so many minutes and hours together talking and putting the worlds to rights. And towards the end of her life, she believed that as a generation, we kind of said, I love you too much. And she started to say the term "stay sassy," because I used to call her the queen of sass and be like, oh, you're so sassy and all of this, because she was with her doctors. She'd flirt with all the male doctors and whatever. She was just amazing. Anyway, I was still dancing at the time, and I went for a casting, and I had a really, really bad experience with a casting director being quite vile to me in front of a room of people, and it completely knocked my confidence. And I just didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't tell my nan about it, but I just stopped dancing. And my nan turned to me. It was really, really towards the end. And she was just like, why have you stopped dancing? You've danced your entire life. What's happened? And I told her about this casting director, and she said, what the hell? Why would you let one person who probably doesn't even remember that encounter ruin your entire career and your dream? So I was like, do you know what? She's right. So I started going to dance classes. I started getting videos of me feeling confident again. And I started posting them on the social media platform that I'd launched as a kind of story of my recovery. And people started to ask me to put on beginner dance classes, teaching other women how to dance in high heels and things like that, because that was the style that I fell in love with, kind of that commercial style where you wear stilettos, you feel sexy and things like that. So I thought about it, and I was like, maybe. Anyway, then my nan sadly passed away, and I really wanted to do something to raise money for the hospice that looked after her. They used to come to our house twice a day to kind of feed her, bathe her and things like that. And then she actually passed away in the hospice itself. So I wanted to do something to give back, because they rely heavily on private funding. So I put on this one-off event in a tiny, tiny studio that only held 15 to 20 people. I charged, I think it was like £25 a ticket, but it was all going to charity. And I decided that I wanted to teach women how to walk in high heels, dance in high heels, and then had two guest speakers. One was a qualified psychologist and one was a motivational speaker. And I kind of wanted to create this day where women could feel safe to try a new skill, to be unapologetically sexy and sassy, and to also meet new friends, meet like-minded people, and just feel that community environment within a space with professionals and qualified people that could help them with their mental health. So I did, and we called it Stay Sassy, and there was a picture of her in the corner, kind of cheering us all on throughout the event. And it was honestly like the most beautiful day of my life. Like, everyone was so open and felt so safe. And we shared our deepest, darkest thoughts and realised that actually we all felt the same. And it wasn't until we were in this room that was kind of this hub of safety, really, that we had the chance to open up about these things. So after the event was over, I was like, I can't let this be a one-off. Like, yes, we've raised an amazing amount of money for charity, but let's scale it up. Let's raise more money. Let's get more women together, and just make it kind of a movement. So the event went from, I think it was like 18 people to 50 people. And then now we do, obviously pre-COVID, I was hosting events for 80 to 100 women every single session, with all of the profits going to charity. There is walking in high heels element, the dancing in high heels element, and then we get a guest speaker in every single time. Since then, we've done retreats, we've done a mini day festival, we've travelled up and down the country with events, and kind of my goal is to get women in the same space, talking, feeling less alone, feeling more confident, whilst raising money for charity. So I set up the Stay Sassy Foundation, which funds all of these events, and also to different charities every single time. And we allow our girls who have been before to recommend charities that mean a lot to them and their families, so that they can feel like they're using the platform to give back to.
Yeah, Steph, I mean, like Ross said, just listening to that, I mean, it actually makes me quite emotional, because I know someone close to me that could have used something like what you're describing when they were going through their difficult time. So I just, honestly, from my point of view, it is unbelievable. I love the story about your nan as well. You know, I'm sure she would be unbelievably proud of you. And, you know, I love the fact that that's where the Stay Sassy came from as well. I think it's amazing that you're, you know, kind of, as you said, giving women a place where they can, you know, not feel alone, a place where they can share their thoughts. It's just unbelievable. And like Ross said before as well, the fact that you've used, you know, an experience that, unless you go through it, I'm sure many people don't really understand it. But you've turned it into such a positive thing. Final question from me, Steph, would be, you've gone through this journey. You're now in a position where you're doing something so great, and you know you've come through it, and I'm sure you're a stronger person for it. But I know this isn't an easy question, but looking back over the journey that you've gone on, what advice would you give to your younger self, or say, you know, a young woman that may be watching this and is having similar feelings right now? You know, what advice would you give to them?
I think now my brain kind of works in quotes and analogies and things like that, and I kind of have loads of quotes that I live by. And there's a few, like, for me, a huge part of my eating disorder was when I couldn't control what was going on around me, I would control my food and kind of restrict my food as a form of kind of implementing that control in my life. And I think the quote that I kind of swear by is, you can't control what you can't control. If I went back to my younger self, I'd just be like, everything that is happening now is happening for a reason. Like, yes, I went through that horrible time with an eating disorder, but it's led me to a career that I love, to meeting incredible women with incredible stories that I never would have crossed paths with if I hadn't have set up Stay Sassy. And kind of all of those hard times lead to beautiful, beautiful moments. And I do think there are huge pressures on women to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to achieve certain things, whether that's in work or personal life. And a friend of mine shared a quote with me recently that was like, you can be beautiful, but beautiful isn't everything that you have. I mean, I've paraphrased. I don't think that's the exact quote, but it's, don't strive for just being beautiful. There is so much more to offer. Like, it's so much more important to have a beautiful heart and a beautiful voice and a beautiful truth than it is to just have a pretty face, or a nice body or whatever. And I think that's the advice that I'd give my younger self, to not try and control everything, and to not be so fixated on your appearance, because if you're staring in the mirror the whole time, you're going to miss everything going on around you, and you'll miss beautiful moments that are happening every day because you're so focused on how you feel and how you look. So I think I could just go back to my younger self and just cuddle them. Like, I wouldn't change anything because it's got me to where I am now, so I wouldn't go back and kind of lead them down a different path, but I would just cuddle them and just be like, look, one day you're going to learn to love yourself. You might not right now, but it's there in the future, so just keep going.
Yeah, again, just this is brilliant what you're doing. I'm obviously proud, obviously, to talk to you that you're doing this sort of thing. I just think it's absolutely incredible. But really appreciate your time taken out to obviously help other people through your current circumstances, etc. So yeah, that's all from me. I think honestly, a lot of people who are watching, a lot of people who are effective currently going through this situation will look up to you, and probably get in touch or follow your Stay Sassy Foundation, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Steph. Great to meet you.